Hi YouTube, welcome back to Wtf Rc Cars. So we're going to carry on with the M-07 build and see where we can get to with this one. Quite enjoying it so far. So let's bring in for a close-up look and crack on with build. Right, so for this part we're going to need part B9 and 3 of the remaining screws, and then you just want to line these up with that and it should drop into place. So once we've got that on, you've got 2 of the screws that are going to go from the top. So basically we're going to get one in there and one in this side. So I'll quickly get these screwed in. Then once we've got them in place, flip it over and you got 1 remaining screw, and this one's going to go in the center. So we get this screwed down and then we'll have a look at what we've got next. I think so part 6, I think we're getting onto the suspension, but let's crack on. Right, so for this part we're going to need B1 and 2 of the D3 parts. Make sure you get them right way around. Then I think I'm going to start with putting the little ball joints in. So you basically just want to get these started, and like with the rest of it, don't over tighten these because you're just going to strip the threads from them. So just keep an eye on it as you're tightening them up. And these suspension arms, they definitely, as I've been cleaning the edges up, they definitely got fibre in them. So again, I'm not sure whether these are the toughened ones or the slightly harder ones because it's the concept, or if they just made out of slightly tougher stuff than the normal Tamiya kits. But certainly as you cut through that just to tidy it up, you can feel it's not just the stock plastic that you usually get on a Tamiya kit. So next thing we're going to want to do, some little domed screws. So we're going to get these. You're going to get your B1 part and we're going to slide these through. And then when you get them level, we've got a tiny little screw to put in the end of it just to sort of close it off so the hinge pin can't fall out. And again with this, no need to go crazy tight, it's just stopping the hinge pin from dropping all the way through. And like the rest of this build, these screws go in so much easier with the correct actual drivers. It's just so much easier when the driver fits the head properly. And I know a lot of people have problems with Tamiya kits, building them and not liking the screws, but trust me, get yourself a decent set of drivers and it makes a world of difference. So for these, it tells you to screw these in, and it says leave them 1.5 mil stood out at the bottom. But what I'd do with these, because they droop screws, I'd just kind of screw these in anyhow and then set it up correctly for the correct droop you want once you've actually completely finished the RC and you've got the wheels on and you can use a ride height gauge to actually set it. So the 1.5 mil stuck out is it's just a guide. But let's move on to his next step, which will be number 7. Alright, so for this one, we're going to fit this way around. And you can see where your droop screws are going to actually catch. Be interesting to see how resistant it is to wear on that, because you've got 2 quite sharp grub screws and they're just going to be running on plastic. Now you could always coat it with something, but it's going to have to be something pretty thin because if the stock ride height setting's only 1.5 mm, you've not really got a lot to play with. But we just need to get these 4 screws in. So I'll get these screwed down. Right, so there we have it. Suspension arms fastened on. And time to move on to the next part. So we're now moving on to the front hubs. So you're going to want to take 2 of these ball joints, 1 in each. And we're going to use these to make up as hubs for steering. And again, you don't want to be over tightening these. So you're going to build these the opposite way around. And they do look symmetrical, these, which would probably make carrying spares easier. So once we've got them assembled, we're going to start building as drive shafts. So with these things, I believe these are 33 mm. I think they actually say it on them somewhere. Yeah, 33. So you want to slide that through. You want to line it up so you can get your pin in. And then we're going to start putting the pin through. And you've got to make sure it goes through the center of that barrel. So once you've got it through there, you then need to get this one of these lovely little retaining pins on, and you position these so the little hook is in one of your spare holes that you don't have a drive pin running through. And these are always a little bit fiddly to get on, but I'm going to try to get it on camera as best as I can. So you basically hook it through where one of your drive pins aren't, and then you've just got to slide it over and make sure it covers where your actual drive pin is. So if you just carefully work that round, and it should clip in, and as you can see, it holds your drive pin to stop it getting out. For these, I like to use the hoodie graphite grease. It is really messy, it does get absolutely everywhere, but it is really, really good for drive shafts. It's just really good at working its way all the way around your drive shafts. But be warned, this stuff does get absolutely everywhere. So we can work that in. Once you've got that in place, we're going to start with this bearing. So you're going to want a bearing on, and then even though these got a bit of oil, I just like to put a bit extra on them. So you want a drive shaft, then you want part C2, then you want your hub. So you should just be able to pull the bearing in, and once you get that in, we want a bearing in the opposite side. So once you've got your bearing set all the way down, you then want your tiny little shim on the outside, and then you get that down, and it's telling us to put one of these little clips in just to stop us losing his shim and everything. But you should end up with a really, really smooth drive shaft, and apparently the bearing sticks out of the hub. Not really sure why. So that is how you assemble one, and the other one is exactly the same procedure, but you just stick it in the other side. So we'll get that built up. So when you're finished, that's what you should have. And I've just dropped a little bit of oil on the outer bearings as well. And if you don't get covered in graphite grease, have you ever really actually been building drive shafts? So let's crack on. So for this next step, for your C-hub carriers, you're going to have to drill a 2.5mm hole out the bottom here, because on the next step we'll be putting this in with a little grub screw. So not sure why they decided not to drill them holes out for us, but it doesn't take very long. So while you've got these off, because it's probably going to be easier to do it this way, I would get these little ball joints screwed in. So I'll quickly do that for both sides. And strangely, there's like a coloured line around both my sort of sealed carriers that look like fracture marks. Not really sure what that is, but it is on both of them. They've both got these weird little lines around, and again these seem to be made of the same fibre reinforced plastic. But we're going to start by getting them ball joints in place. Then you're going to want to drop your hubs in place. Then we're going to want one of the little metal shims dropped in the top. Then we need to get it lined up and get a screw through. So I would get one started and then drop to the opposite side, get that screwed in. And these don't need to be crazy tight, so you should have a nice free movement on the steering. And then we just need to do exactly the same for this side, so we'll get them done. So that's what you should end up with: two opposite facing steering hubs with your drive shafts in. So let's crack on. So next we're going to want to make up as little turnbuckles. So you're going to need the 5mm ones of these, and then basically we're just screwing these in together, and you're taking it down to a 2.5mm gap, so you can either measure it with a gauge, or you can take the easy approach and get a 2.5mm hex and just stick that in it, screw them down till they meet that. But you need to make two of these up, so I'll not bore you with watching me screw tie rods together. So that is basically what you're looking for, 2.5mm in between them. So once we've got that assembled, you're then going to need two little grub screws. We're going to have two of the hinge pins. Then we're going to get one of those hubs, and you're going to start, you want the flat facing down. So we're going to get one of these, and then we need to get our hub so it lines up. And once you got the hub lined up, you just need to slide the pin in. Let's see if we can get that into place. Yep. So I like to just flip them over and make sure I've got the flat lined up perfect. And then you should just be able to slide it into place. Once you've got it in central, then we can take one of those little grub screws, and now you can see why we drilled the hole out. So you can just screw that in. And the reason I just tend to screw these in using one of these bits is because you can't get too much torque on it, because if you over tighten it, you're going to try and split that rather than just hold your pin in. So we want to do exactly the same for the opposite side. And what you can do is get one of these that are slightly smaller, put it through, and then it does let you wiggle it around so you can line it up. And then again, once that's in, we just need to nip his little grub screw down. You don't need to go any tighter. We're just trying to stop this bar from shaking out. You really don't want to be over tightening it, so you can feel when it's got hold of the little bar. Now there's a reason I didn't put these in first, because I'm going to want to put a little bit of graphite grease on them, and while ever they're flapping about you're going to get covered in it, so I find it better to put the graphite grease on last. And that way at least you can limit the amount of graphite grease you get covered in one day. Because although I think this is amazing stuff on drive shafts, it's goddamn awful when it goes all over everything else. So that's what we should end up with if all goes well, and there's not a lot of slop in that. That's pretty impressive. So let's crack on. So the next parts we're putting on here is the K4 and K5 parts, and they're just going to drop into place like that. And then we've got the 4 little screws that we need to be putting on. So you got 2 in the top position, and then 2 go on the lower position. I'm guessing these are just to add a bit more sort of structural strength, but we just need to get them 4 tightened down, and then we'll move on to the next part. Right, first thing we're going to need to do is build these little tie rods up, and Tamiya do give you a bit of a hand here because you've got a hex head in the end of one of these, so you can get them started, and then at least all you have to do is screw the other side down. Now the measurement it gives you for these is 0.5 millimeter. So you basically got to screw these in, and you want 0.5 mil between them, which is going to be pretty difficult to measure unless you've got a feeler gauge. Now I have got a feeler gauge kicking around somewhere, in fact I think I've got a couple on them, but 0.5 mil is going to be pretty close. And basically it looks like we're setting these up to have one facing in and one facing down, and then you're going to have to build the exact opposite, and that's going to be the other end of a steering basically. So I'll get this second one built up, and then we shall crack on with building steering. Right, so that's got his little sort of tie bars done. Next we're going to need to get these screwed in. So we want those little ball joints screwed into a steering rack, and I believe most of these parts are available in aluminium, but for me I tend to swap parts to aluminium if there's either too much play or the part's extremely weak and it'd benefit from being done in metal. So the position we've got on these is we need this facing backwards with one of these on each, and the bearing carriers, or the recessors should I say, for the bearings facing down. So once we've got these fastened on and your recessors facing down, we get a little bit more oil. I just like to put it on the bearings. Then you want the smaller of the set of bearings just pressed into the bottom of here. Then you're going to turn that sort of back round. Right, so once you've got your bearings in, you're then going to get one of your arms with a little recess or little part stuck out. That's going to sit in on the center of the race of the bearing. Then we're going to get a screw in on that one. So the screw head and the little part that sticks out from the steering arm should run on the inner race. Then you're going to get the same on this. So the bit that protrudes out will sit on the inner race, and we can get a screw to go in. So you should end up with your steering assembled like that, with these two facing down. Then we're going to get the last part, which will be the ball joint or the threaded ball joint, and then you want one screw from the bottom of this, so you can get that tightened down. Then once we've got all that in place, we're going to have a bearing on each one of the steering posts. Then we're going to drop that on and push it down so they locate into the bearings. Then you're going to need to drop a bearing on the top of each one. And just get them to sit down into it. And then you can fasten your ball joints to your steering. And then we have some pretty accurate no slop steering. So Tamiya do know how to make steering without a million ton of slop in it. They just choose not to on the TT02s or anything. But we've got a nice bit of steering assembled, as drive shafts assembled, and suspension should be moving pretty freely. And if I'm looking at that right, you've got slight toe out. So it looks like the measurements are pretty accurate. So let's see what else we need. Right, so for this next part we're going to need two A10s and a K6, I believe it is. Then you're going to want your tapered screw from the bottom. And you're going to want to position these body mounts. You've got like a little key to get into position. So it should be a pretty accurate way of fastening these down. There is a little bit of movement in them, but not an awful lot. As you see, there's a little keyed slot, so you can position them pretty accurate. And then you just need to tighten them up. It does say in instructions, do not over tighten. And I believe if you were fitting the optional sway bar or stabilizer bar, that's where your grub screws would go. It does mention that in the instructions. So once we've got that, you're then going to need 5 of your domed head screws, and we should be able to drop this into position. So as screw holes are going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and these are all the same screws, so we'll get all these dropped in and screwed down. So that's what we should end up with now, and I must admit that steering feels absolutely amazing. There's literally no play in it, no slop. The suspension feels really nice. So yeah, there's it's definitely a different experience building this to building the TT01s or the TT02s. I've not yet built one of the higher end TT02s, so the, is it SRX, the new one, and the S and the SR, but from what I can tell, they come with same chassis and everything, just the S versions have different arms. But this feels kind of on a different level to the TT02 so far. Just far more accurate. Yeah, they're not adjustable on the fly, so you've not got the sort of spanner adjustment on these. But just to have it come with all adjustable turnbuckles and the way it feels, quite impressed so far. But in the interest of trying to keep these down to around about 25 minutes, I'll call it a day at that one, and we'll wrap this one up. So there we have it, carrying on with the M-07, and quite impressed with this little thing so far. really enjoyable build. You'll have to let me know if you prefer this kind of angles that I'm using with camera, because I have had a bit of a change around here in studio. Hopefully you can see a bit more of the stuff that we get on channel, and yeah, quite enjoying this. Hope it drives as well as it builds, because it is a really nice enjoyable build, this one. But thanks again for watching WTF RC Cars. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, share to friends and family, and catch you guys again in the next one.